Well, Kyle,
Yes, Garrett.
why the hell isn't anyone talking about the arm?
My question exactly.
Good, you're here.
This is Thancred. So cold and unforgiving.
We were in our first dungeon!
The first Endwalker dungeon. The Tower of Zot is completely summed up by one support duty line Thancred said, well, that victory felt insubstantial. And that's the whole of Zot. It's a weird dungeon. It's such a cool set piece. It's so Zergy and Gigarian, and things are folding out and opening up and journeying through the intestines, and it's such a great set.
The intrigue of the Tower of Zot for me begins and ends with the conversation we already had with Van Daniel. It's a great dungeon. I really love how it looks. I wasn't crazy about the monsters we fought in there. And then you fight the three Stooges ghosts from that live-action Casper movie as bosses.
The Magus sisters, they've been around for a long time. This is a big reference. Many Final Fantasy games have had the Magus sisters, and they're kind of corrupted and twisted. So that's interesting for a long-time fan. I don't think I've ever butted heads with a Final Fantasy reference, maybe outside Omega, but Omega was weird, as much as just the music in the Tower of Zot. I was expecting something dark and dreary and adventurous, and instead it was kind of upbeat and hopeful, and it's exactly the song taken from Final Fantasy IV.
It's very straightforward.
Here's your counter to any naysayers. Your get-out-of-jail-free card. You're an Astinian fan.
Okay, go on.
Astinian hates this dungeon. Throughout the entire support duty, he ends the entire thing by saying, would have been quicker to fight all three at once. The dude was completely bored by this place. And even the subtlety in the final moments that we're going to talk about because they're interesting, he just wanted to dive bomb that damn transistor machine thing. He did not care.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Again, I could look at this dungeon all day. It looks amazing.
The weirdest thing about the bosses is they're not lunar equivalents, which is odd. We haven't seen the Hanish people's gods before. So
this is where I think they pushed the Final Fantasy reference too far. I think they just went, these haven't appeared in the game before, and we really want to drive home the reference for those that are a fan of these monsters. And for that reason, I think it does a bit of a disservice to the world building that has been established up to this point.
Tonally, it all makes sense when the tower despawns. It is made of ether. And as we end, Graha casts Featherfall on everybody. So we're okay, because the whole thing just dissolves. And in that way, we have ourselves another false end. We have another, was that the right thing to do kind of moment. It seems so, but it's supposed to leave you all mixed up and be part of this overall journey that is Endwalker. It's so easy to say first dungeon and compare it directly to Holminster Switch, which was a complete adventure. The other oddity about the Tower of Zot is that nobody listens to Y'shtola when her wizard eyes see an arm or some sort of limb inside this machine. But everyone just dismisses it. Why aren't we listening to Y'shtola?
It's not even a dismiss. It's a straight up, no one else reacts. No one else responds. And it's like the second instance of this going on. Like, why aren't we asking more questions? It's going to happen again near the end of our conversation today. There's another scene where I was just like, why aren't we asking more questions about this? But this is the first instance of this where that seems very important to me. And I think it's supremely odd that none of the other Scions even like react to what Y'shtola is saying or bring it back up afterwards. It's very common when we have like a cutscene scene in Final Fantasy XIV that afterwards you go and have a non-cutscene interaction with usually one of the Scions or one of the main characters that has to do with the part of the MSQ that you're on. This was happening a lot in Labyrinthos. We would like have a nice cutscene, and afterwards you'll still have to right click on Alphino, and he would kind of sum up what we just experienced. And that does happen here. We do kind of have like one of those right click sum up experiences, but there's just no mention of Y'shtola seeing a severed limb in the heart of the power of the Tower of Zot. And that seems super, super important to me.
It's a purposeful interruption. This isn't lazy writing. They're using a trope here. It's anytime someone's like, listen, I got to tell you something. Bam, explosion goes off. Estinian provides this explosion in this case. And of course, G'raha has to catch everybody and all the elephant people are falling and all that sort of thing. And we immediately get back to Razat-Han and having those conversations about flowers and magic. But it's very important. And apparently it's also a man's limb. So I guess it was hairy or something in there. My list of people's limbs it could be is pretty small.
But before we get to whoever's arm that was, make sure to join us tomorrow because we're doing a massive marathon stream. We have been told by people that we trust that if we don't push through to some quest called the Martyr, that there will be riots in the streets. Our chat will actually burn itself down. And also, if you want to see a real life you should tune into the stream tomorrow.
I like that.
Now it's time to just casually drop a ton of lore about an entirely new magic system that we had no idea existed here in the final expansion of the arc that Final Fantasy XIV set out to tell.
I mean, this is after Vitra heavy-handedly suggests that Alphino and Alizé are going to die, or at least be in some sort of Shadow Realm-like turmoil.
I thought it was cool that they actually modeled the dragon to be missing some scales and have essentially a hotspot if you're a dog owner.
I am all into school later on. I'm there. Teacher did a great job. But Ninhada goes off on emotional ether. And you know it's going to be important because they're playing the Endwalker music under it.
It's not ether, Kyle. It's Akasha.
It's Akasha, yes. There's a little bit of turmoil in my head right now because I'm watching Jujutsu Kaisen, which is also going on about the emotions and body and soul magic and which one's more powerful. Does the body hold memories thing? So this is all just bleeding together. So you'll excuse me for a moment. We have Echo that maybe could be fulfilling the business of the flower, but the flower is crazy important. And even we have Vitra just moments before this saying, Midgard-Stormer, they were just into what Hydaelyn had to say about it. So we trust Hydaelyn, why don't you? This flower is so crucial, and then we introduce on top of it the Akasha, essence influenced by feelings, distinct from ether, domain beyond our reach, a gift from on high kind of business. I think this ties directly into the Dinner with the Scions, because the flower is active there as well, and we're talking about it. The Dinner with the Scions is, of course, adorable, and we can gush about giant burgers, really big burgers.
That cheese looked amazing. I've been playing Cyberpunk, and the burgers don't look nearly as good in that game. That game is a feast for the eyes.
Alizé's with you and doesn't like pickles, or is amused by pickles? Maybe she likes pickles, she just finds them funny? I'm not really sure what that meant.
They go as far as to write into the story that, like, a lot of people think the two are the same, but they're actually not. I'm just out with it. Just tell me what is actually true. Don't tell me the misconceptions. But yeah, it sure is sounding a lot like these flowers were bestowed upon the source by Hydaelyn and represent some sort of, would you even call it a power? Is it a power source, or is it just a material Yeah, we get an explanation for ether here, which is just straight up the Force as explained in A New Hope.
Binds us, penetrates us, surrounds us.
Permeates the land, the living things and objects. Although I don't think the Force permeates objects if they're inanimate. Anyway.
I'm sure that happens somewhere, but the Force is messy and it's supposed to be messy. Final Fantasy provides a lot of answers, so this late in the game, introducing a whole new magic system is a little daunting.
It kind of feels like, no, there's the Force and there's metachlorians and they're not related, is kind of how I'm taking this. Because here are the rules as set out by Nidhana about Akasha.
Akasha, on the other hand, exists in a domain beyond our reach. A gift bestowed from on high, or torn from the heavens in some traditions.
But also, apparently, Akasha cannot be interacted with. It cannot be created or destroyed. The only thing that can, quote unquote, influence it is spiritual emotion. And then Nidhana goes on to give what I have internalized as concrete lore for limit breaking.
Whoa, I didn't, what, where? What was this?
When Nidhana explains that when we, the Warrior of Light, experience moments in battle where we, quote, transcend our usual limits, that is a manifestation of Akasha. These are words said directly by the pretty elephant lady.
I'll take your word for it, fisherman.
And then Nidhana dismisses her own cooking, basically like Y'shtola.
The Y'shtola school of thought, yes.
Quote, my analysis of your flower can amount to little more than idle speculation. Yes, thank you, Y'shtola, too.
Mix this with the dinner conversation about how Kryl hasn't felt a hint of Heidelin's presence since having that conversation. We were instructed to carry this flower, and the quote,
"'Twill be your guide, test and proof of your conviction." And then something about seeking joy in darkness, was it?
we have corporeal ether and incorporeal ether. Don't think about it too much. Those are gonna fail somehow. And all we'll have is this new Akasha. And the form I would expect that to take would be, we are going to fall to such a depth that only this flower and our own friendship will walk us out of the Shadow Realm.
Okay, that sounds very RPG. Power of friendship. Tracks while fighting God, no less.
Naturally, but why wasn't the Echo able to do this? Is our Echo off right now? Like,
I'm almost like looking at it like, did the dissenting members of the Convocation find a way to use Akasha, or was like, which came first, the Heidelin or the Akasha, is kind of where my question lingers right now, because I'm kind of looking at Ether as the old school, the ancients way of thinking, the ancients way of creating things. That's they use that and their understanding and their prowess with Ether manipulation to create Zodiark. If Akasha came from Heidelin, which I'm fairly certain it did, what did the members of the Convocation that went and create Heidelin, how did they go? Did they straight up just do the Zodiark ritual all over again? Did Vanad just straight up copy the Zodiark ritual to become Heidelin? Or are we like missing key pieces to the ritual that summoned Heidelin into this world? And that's why I'm like, to me, I'm now stuck in this chicken before the egg question. What came first, the Akasha or the Heidelin? Now, all of this is based off of a theory that Akasha is even directly related to Heidelin, but it really seems like that's what this scene is trying to tell me.
I didn't think of it that way, but that's an interesting thought and would make Heidelin's summoning different and would explain why she's emotionally available, as opposed to our other primals, which are more about what they were summoned to do and duty and conquering and rather having a good time at it sometimes. I like that theory.
Like, I don't really have a this will happen theory, but these are the pieces I feel like are in front of me that I'm trying to piece together. Otter with the cups, but I want the cups. I don't know how they go together, but I've got these cups. You started to connect the dinner scene and our scene with Vitra, and I completely forgot that I also, too, came to this because didn't Vitra talk about Midgard-Sormer choosing to come to the source because Heidelin's warmth seemed to him like a quote-unquote beacon of hope? Because Graha mentions the glow of the flower, quote,
"'Twas akin to spotting a beacon and knowing we were on the right path."
So we're invoking Heidelin and now this flower that is related to Heidelin as this beacon, that it feels like the game is trying to reassure us that yes, we are on the right path, that yes, we can trust Heidelin despite the fact that for all intents and purposes, she is a primal. Also, I guess green is the color of friendship. And now it's time to talk about how Xenos really wants a snack.
Gobble up that moon.
So good. Xenos hanging out on the precipice of this massive tower in Garlemald, staring longingly, one might say hungrily, at the moon. And Amon, I'm just referring to him as Amon from now on because for all intents and purposes, this motherfucker is Amon. He's Amon. That's his personality. His personality is not Fandaniel. He told us as much, and he's never even been trying to masquerade as Asahi.
At least when he was pretending to be Asahi or Fandaniel, he was having more fun. This is gross. Amon is a gross man.
I'm not sure I think of the term gross the same way you do. I would just say he seems concerned.
He's evil.
Was that in question?
Well, Fandaniel was more of a jester type.
That's fair.
And,
yeah.
And he wanted to watch the world burn, and it might be nice to watch it burn, but Amon has a chip on his shoulder, which transforms my participation in your narrative greatly, because you've been excited about a certain little through line where hopefully Emmett comes back. And I've been like, I don't need that. Like, I want him to stay dead. But now that I know Emmett is responsible for making Fandaniel, and after the roller coaster and gymnastics that Emmett pulled off to help get rid of Elidibus, Emmett is 100% responsible for Fandaniel, Amon, trying to destroy the world. So come on back and deal with the psycho. Like for the record,
I don't think Emmett's going to come back, but I think we're going to see Emmett in a new form, essentially. Like we're gonna see like his soul more or less, because I'm really hung up on Heidelin saying I ushered another unto your ethereal sea, and I think it was Emmett. I don't think Emmett is gonna like resurrect and just be hanging out in Solace's body again, doing cool Emmett shit. Like I think like the end of the original Mortal Kombat movie, we're going to be looking at like a pillar of souls, and he's going to come out and be like, you did good, friend. You did a good job. Congratulations. Like Liu Kang's brother.
Oh, that works perfectly what we learn in Ether School too.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think Emmett's going to be resurrected, but I also don't think we've seen the last of Emmett, which means I also think we're going to see Minfilia again. And like, you've sold me, man. I was not a Minfilia fan, and I think I'm going to feel things if I see Minfilia again.
We might also have a red herring here with Fandaniel talking up. I'm going to say Fandaniel because that's who's talking in the quotes on the screen. But yes, I acknowledge that this is way more Amon than it is Fandaniel now. But Fandaniel... No, I'm just saying, like, it's confusing. It's purposely confusing. It's the beginning of expansion. They're adding mystery to make sure the plot has somewhere to go, and we're not just answering things all the time. That'd be boring. So he talks about his own dream he was having, and it seems like it was distinct from the final days, because he mentions that final days dreams were your thing, Xenos. I had my own dream. And then, of course, we have the dreamer on top of this. So is here where you wanted to have the conversation about who's the arm? Is this it? Can we have it
now?
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of things kind of established in this short scene. First, which is like you were already talking about. You said that Thancred in the trust said that this felt like a hollow victory. I don't think it necessarily is, because if Fandaniel said loss of a single spire is hardly fatal to our plans, it does, however, slow the rate at which we siphon ether. So first thing, confirmed. They are siphoning ether.
It's Batman.
Yes, just like Batman. God damn it. I hate that movie. I hate that movie. Jim Carrey's the only reason to watch it. I guess the one tower isn't that bad, but if we continue micro-focusing on the other small towers, that Fandaniel Amon isn't worried, but is worried if we were to attack the main tower in Garlemald. In the background, we're having conversations about turning our sights to Garlemald. So, yay. Looks like we're going to do the thing that Amon doesn't want us to do. But also in this exact same scene, Xenos is like, it basically is like our hype man, our really, really sexy ASMR hype man. Because Xenos is like, if you knew him like I knew him, you'd know that our friend is indeed bold. Basically meaning Xenos thinks we're going to attack Garlemald, which makes Amon feel they need to, quote, prepare a proper Welcome. Oh, I'm afraid the deflector shield will be quite operational when your friends arrive. All of that happens. And then we get into the part that I really want to cook on. Do you got your apron on, Kyle?
Okay, let's do it. Which part? What is it? Well, I'm ready.
Okay, all of this leads into, like, we get, like, depressed Xenos, because Mon is, like, almost like a dying marriage, just like, why are you only excited when you talk about him? Like, we get Xenos having a delightful little monologue. He's very depressed. He says, so very hot.
So very hot.
And I want to use that all the time for anything now. But Amon gets to his dream in this back and forth between the two of them. It talks about a recurring dream back when he was mortal, and he likens this dream to Xenos' dream of the final days. Doesn't say he's dreaming of the final days, but it says that he sees it as the same kind of dream. We don't know what kind of dream that is, and Amon's description of his dream is exceptionally vague. Doesn't specify any visuals from it. We don't know what's going on in Amon's dream, but we do know the game has shown us that Xenos' dream of the final days is extremely consequential. It's very important because it is what set Xenos out on the path that he is currently on. What are these types of dreams? Why are they important? What triggers them?
Monteshane is the kind of teacher you want. He laughs at his own jokes. He's having a jolly good time up there. Alphinaut, no one's surprise, was teacher's pet, gave all the tours, monitored the halls.
Insufferable know-it-all.
Yep, exactly. But we have a nice, brand new Endwalker PowerPoint with sort of sword in the stone sort of displays where he summons forth a paint and brush and all that.
Very Merlin.
My wonderful Asian Darth Vader baby is revealed. Sadly, way too quickly. The reason the guy couldn't talk was because he was influenced by this memory magic, as all forum members are.
Feels like they could have mentioned that back when that scene happened. Because of the lack of fanfare in the way that this was like, just like, oh yeah, no, we all have this. Like, it wasn't some big revelation. I'm like,
well, it is taboo. So while, yes, Fortuno could have been like, don't worry about it, it's something we can't talk about, moving on. But no, it is taboo because memory manipulation magic is not allowed in Charlene. Charlene, yes. My trick is you say it like Charlemagne, said by Sean Connery on the beach after he chases birds. Charlene.
This vexes me.
In the forum, they have a rule that you can't manipulate memories. It's illegal. However, they did it to everybody there because, well, we know better. We know better than that. We would never use this for any sort of evil gain.
We can be trusted with nuclear bombs.
Yes.
You can't be trusted with nuclear bombs.
Of course. So the forum is sworn to secrecy. He couldn't tell you if you tried. The particulars, however, would cause a panic. Bound by enchantment, they can't speak without 9/10 of the forum agreeing that this topic is available for discussion. Cause a panic? Not allowed. This is super duper shady. What could cause a panic? That's too big. Like, we could just sit here for an hour farting off random ideas about how big this idea in Endwalker is going to be, this reveal. It could just be the existence of Zodiark and everybody would lose their minds. But who knows? This isn't the part I'm really interested in right now. What does interest me is the breakdown, and I want to isolate this from Nidhana's conversation, of the three forms of ether, because we've talked about this before. The soul, the memory, the incorporeal, they're both linked. In particular, the soul is rarely dramatically changed. Corporeal ether is your person, your stomach, you gotta eat, you gotta drink, it's in constant flux. So he basically explains how Louis Soir deleted people's memories so they wouldn't worship Grandpa and keep bringing him back. Louis Soir used this memory ether to cover up his own dealings with Bahamut in the past. The big cutscene and the Coils of Bahamut and all that. So we get a justification for how that went down. There's a bit here about how they'll discover all this should they return to the Ethereal Sea. They went to the Ethereal Sea, they came back, they made a bunch of decisions based on that experience. it opens your mind, but it's also where you're kind of divided up into ethereal parts and reborn. I'm not sure what to do with that information right now, except the part that ties back to our Ascian rejoining Emmett-like conversations of there are theories that memories are etched upon the soul and that some souls remain whole and are born in new forms. So you can come back. Not everybody is Gaia'd out. Not Final Fantasy Gaia, like Gaia, the spiritual essence and lore of our own world in that way.
So where are you going with this? Why is this important to you?
To me, this is important because it justifies how we could have Emmett come back. As you were just saying, as this reborn soul, not soulless anymore, but still holding on to the memories. And it also is a nice little nod to ancestral memory, which we are always kind of flirting with when we talk about rejoinings and, of course, star showers and everything like that.
It was a big thing out with the mole in Stormblood. It was a big thing with Sadu. Like, Sadu and her tribe were, like, really big into the reincarnation beliefs, and that she believed she is the reincarnated self of a previous great warrior of her tribe, which might be something to that. I think that this game doesn't judge its religions. There's all kinds of religions, and the game just goes, you know what? All your beliefs? Plausible.
They're all valid, and they can all make monsters. I highlight this because it's extremely important. Could you get through the game without fathoming this? Absolutely, because I assume, just like everything in Final Fantasy so far, it's going to have emotional overtones. And if you're into the lore and the magic, you can look below those and see the structure that's holding that up. But now we have a very clear, spelled out classroom setting that said, here is why you might have ancestral memories. Here's why Ascian dreams can still be a thing, or ancient dreams.
Why you can be shown Amarat and suddenly hear the echo.
Exactly. And justifies Louiswa, Coils Bahamut, and all that. So it's an overarching little piece of the puzzle that they held on to this moment. And I think they did a very good job using Monteshane as that vessel.
The entire theme of who we once were hangs heavily over Endwalker. It wasn't right out the gate, but the second we get the reveal of Fandaniel previously being a Mon and essentially admitting that he don't give a crap about the station of Fandaniel.
Imbued with the former Fandaniel's knowledge and memories, but I never felt that they were truly a part of who I am.
We were off to these races, which is, granted, this really started back in Shadowbringers, but we weren't talking about it for a little bit. And once we get that Fandaniel Amon revelation, suddenly we're here again, thinking about who we once were.
And people have told us that this wraps up the story. I can't say if this is wrapping up the Echo, this magic lore we're building. It definitely seems, though, that there is going to be a fundamental breakdown of these three kind of primary etherology ideas compared to something like Akasha. And we will be transcended, pulled apart, Shinji clapping with our other parts. Something's going to happen where we then have to use our emotions and our love of our scions, in particular, Alizé and Alphino, to guide us back to the real world. We are going to cross the precipice of death. And that could be death in a get stabbed kind of sense. It could be death in a ether and more spiritual kind of sense.
Death in a form of who we are, right? Like going back to Shadowbringer, hell, going back to the conversation with Varys forever ago about what would happen to rejoining, and kind of selling it like, well, if you're the ancestor of an ancient, who cares? You're going to be rejoined anyway. You're going to be your old self. Ain't that cool? But that's still a personal death. That's a personality death. That's a soul of you, the person you've now become in this new world. It's the death of that, right? Like, I keep coming back to the fact that we've still got, the Azim crystal. It's like, why haven't we pulled that out and looked at it during any of these conversations about memories?
Why isn't anyone listening to Y'shtola?
I'm always listening to Y'shtola.
Far colder on the earth than in the heavens. Yes, far colder indeed. Bitterly so.
We drop off the talismans across the world, and it's time for the best duty they've made so far, really. Like the Thancred solo duty.
I don't like solo duties. This is my favorite solo duty. This is a legitimately great solo duty. It's a solid stealth game. And look at you making me run right past the fact that we basically got like a mini Stormblood sequel and we got to all hang out in the Alamigo throne room and everybody was there and it feels like the Return of the King. It feels like Return of the Jedi. It feels like the final entry in and magnum opus. I was just really happy to see Lise again.
Either fantabulous, excellent victory and a whole different story lies for us on the other side, or horrible doomed befalls everybody. We're doing this too early.
I bet Doom first, victory second. Doom now, victory later.
We're doing this too early for an expansion. We're doing it too late for Stormblood. That's the weird part about this, right?
You've mentioned many times to me that you think that Shadowbringers is as popular as it is because it is such a standalone story. When would we have had this meeting during Shadowbringers? We effed off to the first.
Weren't we having this meeting when we got the call in the first place?
That is a very good point. Oh my God, is that what that meeting was about? It was, wasn't it? We were reading about like invade, because we had routed the Garlean forces. That's the whole point of Stormblood. We routed the Garleans, and the only next logical step would be to invade.
And Thancred was scouting before he fell over at the table, and he was going to give us the report. Shadowbringers was filler. It's confirmed. Filler expansion. What a waste of everybody's time. I can't believe they made Shadowbringers.
Yeah, we just freaking stall.
Yeah, what a stall.
So we play Metal Gear Thancred.
Yep.
This is Thancred.
We get to Garlemald. I've been waiting for this since Realm Reborn. It's there. It's on the map. It's been on the map since Realm Reborn. Nestled in the vortex of a storm. I don't know. I'm reading it like the elevation's so high, like above the clouds, just so cool. So we established Camp Broken Glass. I'm
walking on broken glass.
You gonna get your kazoo out for this one? We established Camp Broken Glass. I'm stoked as hell to be questing beside Lucia again. She's one of my favorite non-main characters.
Yep, Maxima's back. That's mine.
Yeah, Maxima is just straight up, if Kyle was a character in Final Fantasy XIV. We set off with a monolane to stalk a woman, because that's what Final Fantasy XIV is about.
You can just imagine the hillside littered with day one people going up and down and up. Oh, she turned around. It was up and down and up and down. It must have been nightmarish.
We just take the worst part of Assassin's Creed and drop it in my MMO.
We just did Thancred Solo Duty.
We just had good stealth.
But it was kind of in my mind. I get what they're doing here. Like, this is all a big, heavy-handed, I believe necessary at the pace and process that Final Fantasy tells its story. This is a necessary step in humanizing the Garleans and making you think about all those historical things you just thought about.
Oh, I think so too. This very specific type of mechanic drives me completely bonkers. This segment does bring up some interesting bits. We essentially made a conclave of untempered Garleans. It's fronted by Lucinia. Very nice dress. Don't feel like it would keep you warm enough.
Yeah, it might have layers.
I have never seen anyone wear a corset because it's cold outside. We rapidly get introduced to this little kind of encampment of untempered Garleans. They are supremely suspect of us, which I didn't find all that surprising, but it kind of just stays at this point for to me, it felt like the entire chapter, this entire portion we're going to talk about could just be called The Garleans Don't Trust You, or The Garleans Don't Want Your Help. That's kind of the overarching theme of everything that's going on here. What I do find interesting is that damn radio, because this is where it starts. We walk over under the gazebo past a ton of players who just wanted to hang out with us while we were playing. Kind of messes with the solitude of the situation.
Day one experience.
We hear a creepy radio playing. And we talk to, not even a name, unnamed Garlean. We talk to unnamed Garlean. We talk to the stormtrooper that bonks his head. And mostly goes on about some stuff that kind of sounds like I've been under a lot of stress, mental nonsense. But one thing that at this point I dismissed as crazy talk, this Garlean believes that Varys is talking to them all through these cerulean-powered radios. I also want to give a shout out to a non-cutscene piece of dialogue because I think Alizé sums up this entire section wonderfully. Shortly after we go to meet I believe they're called tappers, which are essentially paid slaves to mine ceruleum. The way they describe themselves, they were taken from their homelands, brought to Garlemald, and forced to mine ceruleum. But they also mention having paymasters, and I'm like, glad they get a pay stub, but work that you can't quit is still slavery.
We learned about conscripts back in Stormblood, and that's why the Doman Resistance had to destroy their Aetheryte so that Garlean soldiers who are not fully Garlean could teleport in and attack the place. So when we get to Camp Broken Glass, there is an Aetheryte there, but it's artificial. We also have teleporter pads in things like the Praetorium, so you could say that this is a completely artificial Garlean Aetheryte, and anybody can teleport using it. There are structures in place to pay and take care of these people, but it's still an awful situation.
Shortly after we meet the tappers, Alizé has a quote in non-cutscene dialogue where she said, after all the atrocities committed in the Empire's name, perhaps it is for the best that it is consigned to history. But what of the ordinary people, their lives, their stories, should they be forgotten too? It's like the whole point of this chapter is humanizing the Garleans and making us understand why some people wouldn't even want to be saved, at least not by us. It's quite the monkey wrench to throw into the twins, particularly Alphino's desires.
Sure, but he's so well adjusted. I'm really happy for the guy.
No, he's handling it great, and I'm glad because I think you could sow cheap drama by having Alphino kind of reel against this.
And it would be cheap because it'd be a retread of everything we did in Stormblood and just about every MMO zone you've ever been to. An RPG, we don't trust you. Do some quests for us now. We trust you. Yay, we're part of your army. We actually showed up with the army here. We already have the army. And it's not even deciding what we're gonna do with it. Can we do the morally right thing and help the people inside? And that's why I find Quintus later on interesting, because he really poses that monkey wrench.
Our characters go about this smart. We meet Licinia. We do our best to try and help them because we see a hopeless situation. It does not go well. But our characters act intelligently past this. We meet back at Camp Broken Glass. We immediately inform Lucia of what happened with Licinia. Not at all those two names making any sort of kerfuffle in my head trying to recall names. Nope, not at all. This brain is a steel trap. Immediately, Lucia is like, we'll take that under advisement. We'll make sure that we approach any further survivors with caution so we don't scare them off into taking risks with their own lives purely because they're even afraid to be around us, which is cool. Great. Game's being smart. When we bury Licinia, though, there's another mention of Varys on the radio in that scene when we're standing over the graves of Licinia and the sister that she was hiding. That Jarek the Tapper just immediately outs. It's just like, oh, yeah, she got her sister to think about. And we're like,
I thought it was a zombie situation.
I mean, this is kind of a zombie situation. I mean, the trope of like trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved or doesn't trust you enough to be saved by you, that shows up in like all kinds of zombie.
Oh, yeah, people are the real monsters. Absolutely.
But as we're standing there over their graves, the twins and the Warrior of Light like talk about how there may have been some truth to Varys speaking over the radio. And that's where I go, okay, there was something going on here. There's something going on with Varys. There's something going on with these radios because we wouldn't mention it again. And Alphino, the speaker of truth, if there's any character that I believes what he's saying, it is Alphino. Because he doesn't go all Y'shtola or Nidhana and dismiss his own claims immediately after saying them. We get back. Y'shtola informs us of what they learned from curing some Garleans. We learn the entire backstory of what sparked the Civil War, which was Varys' assassination and the interplay and combat between the 3rd Legion and the 1st Legion, who apparently, I guess, stayed loyal to Varys even after his death. Basically stamp it in stone. Yes, this was 100% Elidibus's fault.
And Asahi's.
Yeah. So the first melees that caused Varys to abandon the front was because of Elidibus sowing seeds of discord, talking about how Xenos was possessed by a demon, which, funny enough, he was the demon possessing Xenos as he sowed these seeds of discord. And so you already are sending like the third and the first against each other, and then Varys dies, and the first blames the third for a coup. All the while, but now we find out from Y'shtola that both sides of this conflict were funded by House Brutus, funded by Asahi, Fandaniel, Amon in Asahi's body. We get our payoff as to Fandaniel even being in Asahi's body, because up to this point, I was starting to think, kind of seems like it's just in Asahi's body because it'd be fun to make us all as players go, gross.
He had that fat wallet in his pocket.
I mean, they mentioned it before, but it was never so clearly spelled out exactly what he was doing with that money. The cured Garleans mentioned to Y'shtola that they saw Varys giving them orders in their dreams. So not even a mention of radio here. So we got another dream here.
Yep, another dream thing. And in particular, Varys said,
"May the Tower of Babel stand as testament to the glory of Garlemald."
a little on the nose with the name there, Final Fantasy 14, but I get what you're going for.
You're gonna trigger the reference people. You're gonna trigger the reference police, Kyle.
It's a tower that caused disjointed warfare. It's a little on the nose.
And we have a failure to communicate here, and then the people that are tempered straight up cannot be communicated with through traditional means.
Layered.
Tower of Babel all over this business. But right when the most interesting piece of information in the scene at this table is given out, we don't react to it. Boy Shorts wants to talk about talismans.
While it is likely more by coincidence than design.
It was by design?
The talismans are like the radio. It's a little convenient being in the same
is convenient.
Chapter.
How are you feeling about that? Because I'm bordering on like a little like that's a little annoying. Because the target Boy Shorts and Y'shtola are talking about how the radios and the talisman have a connection. And they even mention it seems too convenient to be coincidence, but Y'shtola straight up plainly says she believes it to be just that, and I believe her. Why would Y'shtola? If it was Orianne, I wouldn't believe him. But it's Y'shtola. Is it just coincidence? And I'm just like, should this annoy me? Should I be annoyed that it's coincidence? Why even bring it up if it's coincidence?
I don't think it's annoying. It is moving fast because we went from Porksies to talismans to radio in a pretty short amount of time, a large amount of time for those waiting at home during the time period of releases. But this is happening pretty fast. These are all new technologies.
We've really been taking the threat out of tempering.
Which would make sense that Endwalker, of its many things that might wrap up, it's just going to end tempering. We're done with it from here on out. We're going to deal with other sources of evil, which is fine. They got the Void. They got plenty of options.
Something's got to go wrong with this. Like, there's got to be a reason that the radio is similar to the talisman. I refuse to accept that it's just like, what a coincidence. Anyway.
Well, it's etherically dense, like the scales were. We don't know the ins and outs of the little gems and everything that makes up the talisman. That, to me, is the only real hole I have in this equation. Why is a radio like a talisman? What are the symbols and gems on the talisman doing, outside of just being Vitra's scales, which would be etherically dense, maybe even from another world?
The similarities are striking.
What is Ceruleum? Is it just dinosaur ether? Is it fuel?
Is it essentially oil? Is that what you're saying? It's petroleum?
Like the old dead things and the ether, because everything living has some amount of ether? That could be. But I don't think that's the question I've been waiting for. This, to me, makes me want to know more about Garleans. Because is the arm, the dreamer, and the radio all the same person?
Yes.
You radiance!
We've arrived. We're in Cooking Town. Strap your aprons on. Yes. I think it was Varys' arm and Varys is the dreamer.
Because there's other options, but they don't make sense. Particularly after we farted around getting Xeno's body back so long, he wouldn't part with that.
No,
in order to power towers.
The only other thing I can think of is we have cloning. make a bunch of whoever you want. Like, you're sitting on a stockpile of Solace bodies. Cut those up. But without a soul, is it worth anything? Does a lifeless husk even have ether in the first place?
Then you would say there's a person in there. Why would you cut up a clone? You can make more clones. So it has to be a very important individual. And that's where I am struggling with what I understand of Garleans, and those that are purely born Garleans and those that are half or conscripted. We have these artificial aetherites, so clearly they have found ways with their fuel to maneuver the world and work magitech and everything like that. If this was a Louis-Swa situation, absolutely that's Varys, because everybody in Garlemald prayed to Varys, their god, their emperor, and he absorbed all that ether and is now being used as batteries to power the towers. And the primal, and they even say that there is a primal doing the tempering, you know, the tremendous roar when everyone woke up is the primal Varys. It would make sense if it was. But how did Garleans, who can't use magic or summon primals, make a primal baby? I don't know.
Is that why you had to take someone with Garlean blood and divvy him up amongst all of the towers?
Is the faith of Garleans, their fanatical belief in their emperor, greater than the tribes you're capturing to make monsters in the other towers?
Well, if you're siphoning ether in the first place, you don't need your own ether.
That's true. That's a good point. Good point. Yes. Yeah, because there's just siphoning. So the arm or limbs isn't doing the powering. It's doing the purposing. It's motherboarding. It's why it wants to flow together. So the head is in the Tower of Babel and all the limbs are going back to the... How many towers do we have? So traditionally, when you cut up a person, you would think of burying the 5 pieces at the corners of the earth.
Jesus Christ.
This is a traditional story, but have you never once, have you ever heard a fantasy story where they cut up a person and buried their bodies across the corners of the earth so they could never be rejoined in lynchdom or something like that? That's as classic as it comes.
No, I'm mostly just thinking of how Dexter got rid of bodies in the titular show Dexter.
Oh, well, that's a serial murder. I'm talking about fantasy.
You would, I mean, as someone who enjoys horrific drama, you would typically remove the limbs from the torso and then also the head from the torso, which would leave you with 6 items.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're including the torso here, right? So that, but I'm saying traditionally you would probably only do 5, and then the body would be some sort of device to power them.
The head is in the massive one, and everything's just beaming directly into his Garlean eye, and eventually we're going to have to fight primal Varys, but he'll be missing an arm.
Yeah, because the arm got slammed by Estinian, right? So the arm got wrecked. Yes, that's where I'm going. But there's some sort of mystery here about how Garleans work that I don't understand yet. Because I thought I had a pretty good grasp of the no magic rules and conscripts on top of that.
Nothing but confusion and smiles here. That's our big cook for this. We meet Quintus. I don't really have a lot to say about Quintus because he's basically just a contrarian the whole time. What seems interesting or intriguing to me about Quintus is they're the first legion. So they're the people that stayed loyal to Varys even after his supposed assassination. I think he actually was assassinated, but I think he's still lingering around in some horrible, inhuman way. He imprisons the twins, doesn't imprison the Warrior of Light, because basically is like, wouldn't do much. Just be, I think refers to it as an itch. A shot collar would just be an itch to the Warrior of Light. Eulis, who we haven't really talked about yet, but all you really need to know about Eulis is that he's...
Traitors to your homeland! Have you no shame?
Just a lot of fun.
He's a quest device. At the moment, we are currently questing in this area.
Right before we broke, Eulis informed us that Quintus is planning a combined assault on the Talaferoi. He apparently dispatched a messenger to go talk to whatever's left of the 10th Legion. I think we're heading for what I see as a classic MMO, because I played World of Warcraft. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. Horde and alliance, band together, go fight we're gonna get there. I think we're gonna get there. We are gonna go fight the Talaferoi with the Garleans, and I think it's gonna go horribly wrong, because we know that Amon and Xenos know that we're coming.
Yes, very well then. I suppose I must prepare a proper welcome.
But we're not there yet. And this is where we left. The First Legion is trying to cobble enough of a force together to do something to fight back against the Talaferoi. Alphino and Alizé are still captives, and we're off into the snow to search for Ceruleum to help keep these Garlean soldiers alive.